Hi everybody, this is Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the February My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit. This month we received a lot of papers and embellishments from the Simple Stories Simple Vintage Love Story collection. And I absolutely love these collections from Simple Stories that have lots of bright colors and florals. I wanted to include a lot of fussy cut florals on this layout, and I also wanted to use some hexagons. I love to use hexagons on my scrapbooking layouts, and this time I even cut my photos into hexagon shapes. I used some dies that were in my stash. I'm pretty sure that these dies were made by Card Deco Essentials. I chose 4 different sizes of hexagon dies, and I cut out the photos with the largest shape, and then I cut out pattern paper with the other 3 shapes. I cut out a pink and a yellow in the next size down from the photos, and then I used this really pretty white paper with lots of pink and yellow florals on it for the next size down, and then for the smallest hexagons, I used a print that has a lot of black and bright colors in it. I want the hexagons to have a little bit of dimension. So for each pattern paper hexagon I cut out 3 more in white cardstock. I use ATG adhesive and I stack those white cardstock hexagons on top of each other. And then I put the pattern paper hexagon on the top. And then I ink the edges with the corresponding color. I used Distress Oxides in Fossilized Amber and Fired Brick for those 2 larger hexagons. And then to ink the edges of the medium-sized ones, I used Victorian Velvet Distress Oxide. And then to ink the smallest ones, I used Distress Ink in Black Soot. And although I didn't ink the edges of the photos, I did put the 3 layers of cardstock behind each of them. Now I'm going to start my mixed media background. As always, I have a piece of 120-pound smooth white cardstock that I have coated with some Liquitex gesso. I have a stack of those that I keep handy so I can get going on my mixed media backgrounds without having to gesso a piece of paper. I am using the packaging technique, which if you're not familiar is taking a piece of plastic, adding some spray to it, and then kind of squishing it down against the background paper. The spray that I'm using here is a Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist in Aquamarine. There was a lot of gold mixed in, but the gold all got clumped in one area. Not sure why that happened, so I used my paper towel to lift up the area that had a lot of gold, and then I went ahead and added more sprays to the background, and there's a little touch of gold in there, but there's no big areas anymore. And normally I love gold and I do love touches of gold, but the area that had so much gold just looked very dark and I wanted this to be a very light, colorful layout. Now I'm adding another paint. This one is by Shimmerz paints. It's a Shimmerz called It's Mint to Be. I'm once again using the packaging technique to spread that all around the background. I really like to add splatters. I like to get the splatters all over the area of color that I've added to the background, but I especially try to get those splatters around the outside edge of where I have the color. I think that that's the area where you can notice the splatters the most, and I just like the way it looks to have a small border of small splatters around the more solid area of color. And then once I had added splatters in It's Meant to Be Me, I went back and added some more splatters in Aquamarine. Some of these Tattered Angels Glimmer Mists have been in my stash for a long time, and this particular one had a little bit of an issue with the top of the bottle. I was getting a lot of the color on my fingers, so I grabbed a piece of paper towel and I tried to have the paper towel absorb the extra color instead of my finger absorbing the extra color. Now I'm using a baby wipe. I wanted to clean up the area around the outside of the big area of color. I don't want to get rid of all the splatters, of course, but there were just too many of them, I thought. I want it to be a little bit more of a controlled mess. So I'm trying to carefully remove some of those stray bits of paint without getting too close to that large area of color. I don't want to start smearing the area that I just created. Before I went any further, I used my heat tool to dry the background. Now I'm adding just a couple more splatters. I know that seems odd that I just removed some splatters and now I'm adding more, but I just want to make sure that there's a gradual progression from the area of color to the white area with some crisp splatters in between. So I just added them in a couple of spots where I thought there weren't enough. The reason that I used the heat tool was that I wanted to make sure that the background was completely dry before I added those splatters. If the splatters hit the area where I use the baby wipe, it could be wet enough that the splatters would diffuse a little bit, and I didn't want that look. I wanted the splatters to remain kind of small. Now I'm using the stencil we received in this month's kit, along with some modeling paste that was mixed with some heavy body acrylic paint. I like that combination. I've been using it a lot lately because the modeling paste is often not totally white, and this really helps to make it a brighter white, and that's the look that I was going for on this layout. I want to mention that by adding acrylic paint to the modeling paste isn't as thick, so it does make a change in how the modeling paste spreads, so I just wanted to point that out. The stencil in the kit this month has a number of different patterns on it. There's a larger circle, a smaller circle, some triangles, and some lines. At first, I was going to use the larger circles and the smaller circles, but then I decided that I was going to go mainly with the smaller circles, although I did have a couple of the larger ones that snuck in there, and they match in fine with the rest of the background. Now I'm adding some watered down white acrylic paint splatters all over the entire background. I've placed my stencil down on my table. Not a good idea to let the modeling paste dry on the stencil. I do go ahead and wash it in a little while, but I just wanted to mention the sooner you can clean that off of your stencil, the better. Lately, I've been experimenting with trying out more than one stencil on the same layout. So in addition to the stencil that was in the kit, I'm also using this Tim Holtz stencil. I use this all the time. It's a really, really tiny dot, and I thought that this would look nice all around the edge of the circle. I mixed some more modeling paste with the acrylic paint, and then I went ahead and added these dots. I just went right over the other stencil work that I did. And in the final layout, you can see the smaller dots and the larger dots from both stencils all around the outside of the area where I have the hexagons. Once I went all the way around the outside of the blue circle with the smaller stencil, I added some of the stenciling to the center of the circle as well. There's one area where the background is really white because I added some stenciling and then I didn't like it and I scraped it away. But you won't end up seeing that in the final layout because my hexagons are going to be covering that area up. So I didn't spend any time adding any extra paint to it because I knew that would be the case. Then I turned over the stencil and used it as kind of a stamp, although it didn't really have any effect on this particular layout. So I went back to just using the stencil in the regular way, and I added some modeling paste in a few more spots. This collection has a lot of touches of black in it, so I thought that it made sense to add some tiny black splatters to the background. I try not to go crazy when I add the black splatters, so to make them very small, I use a scissor to tap against the top of the straw that holds the color, and for some reason this makes small splatters. And then I also tried tapping my finger. That seems to make slightly larger splatters. I didn't want to add too many of them, but I thought it would be nice to have a little bit of a variety in the size of the splatters. Then I allowed the background to dry, and now I'm adding all of the elements to my layout. I do want to mention that I knew where I was going to put these hexagons before I cut out all of the shapes and gave them dimension, and before I made my mixed media background. I had experimented a little and I knew that I wanted this to be the composition. I cut the hexagons out of some white cardstock, I played around with them, and then I used those hexagons to layer behind the pattern paper. This way I don't waste a whole bunch of time or pattern paper. I add some ATG adhesive to the back of each of the hexagons. I have to say that it didn't really hold them down too well. I had to go back when I was all done with the layout and pick up each of the hexagons one by one, put some gel glue on the back, and then allow them to dry. It's just there's so much modeling paste. The ATG adhesive doesn't really have anything to hold on to, but the wet glue worked a lot better. So I spent a little bit of time rearranging those smaller hexagons. I wasn't sure exactly where I wanted them. I had a few extras, so I took some of them away. And then I took a whole bunch of fussy cut flowers and I began tucking them into the area around the photos and around the pattern paper sheets. This collection has so many beautiful florals in it. I loved the combination of the pink and the blue and the yellow, along with the touches of black and white and green. It was just a really pretty color combination. And I could have fussy cut out so many different sheets of pattern paper because they were all so beautiful. And like I said, there were so many flowers. I probably should have done this first, but after I placed all the flowers down, I went around and I inked the edges with the Distress Oxide in Fired Brick. Then I started working on my title. I'm using 2 stickers from the sticker sheet. I love the big script word love in combination with the sticker that says you. I wanted to add a few more elements to the page. You can see here I have an assortment of butterflies and birds and hearts and a few more flowers. And I'm using my Distress Oxides once again to ink the edges. For the pink areas, I'm using the Fired Brick, and for the blue areas, I'm using Evergreen Bough. There are also a few yellow elements, and for those, I'm using fossilized amber. The butterflies were both fussy cut out and from the die cut packs, and the hearts were all die cuts, and then I fussy cut out those birds from the same pattern paper that I fussy cut out all the other flowers from. The photos that I'm using for this layout are of my daughters, Danielle and Julia. They were taken back in 2016. I believe that I ended up using one of the photos that I took on this day for our Christmas card that year. And it was one of those days where I just got so many nice photos and I just continue to scrapbook them. There are still quite a few more. I'm arranging the 2 birds that I want to include on this layout on that yellow hexagon, and I had a little bit of trouble getting them arranged exactly where I wanted them. I'm also layering in some flowers, and I just couldn't get it quite right, so I ended up trimming the fussy cut flowers back a little bit, and then I was finally able to get the 2 birds to fit together. I wanted to make sure that one of the birds was a little bit higher than the other bird, just so that it would look a little bit more interesting. For finishing touches, I want to add some butterflies and some hearts. I'm adding blue butterflies and pink butterflies. I'm popping up the wings of all of them except for the very, very smallest one with some foam. It's just something that I do on almost all of my layouts where I use butterflies. It just gives them a little bit of dimension. I put a little bit of foam on each of their wings, and then I add some adhesive to the entire back of the butterfly, press down on the center of the butterfly, and then the wings will lift up a little bit. I also wanted to add some hearts, and I added some of the foam to the back of the hearts too. I liked that little bit of dimension on the hearts as well. I did a little bit of rearranging. I moved a flower to the top of the layout, and then I put the 2 hearts in the spot where that flower was. I added a pink butterfly near the birds, and then a super tiny butterfly that was too small to pop up near the blue butterfly toward the top of the page. Now I'm using some self-adhesive jewels that I had in my stash to add a little bit of an extra texture and dimension to the layout. I put these jewels in the centers of the butterflies and also in the middle of the hearts, and then I added one of them to the top of each of the 3 letters of the word you. I thought there was a little bit of an empty spot toward the right side of the layout, so I added a big pink butterfly, and then I added a few jewels to it. That was the very last touch, and here are some close-ups. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed watching it. I really had fun making this layout, and it came together pretty quickly, which is unusual for me. I just want to say thank you so much for all of those encouraging comments. They really mean a lot to me. I was also really happy to hear that some of you are going to give mixed media a try. That always makes me feel wonderful. It's so much fun, and I hope you enjoy doing it. Please take a look in the description box where you'll find a link to the My Creative Scrapbook website. You could check out all of the beautiful kits that they offer every month there and order a subscription. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.